Who is someone you regretted sleeping with? Story 1. A girl I went to school with. My girlfriend had broken up with me. Just totally out of the blue. Over the phone, I learned 30 years later from a conversation on FB that her mother made her do it. Sat on the bed beside her and made sure her 20-year-old daughter did it. Dodged a bullet on that one, because her mother was a totally controlling bitch. She invited me to study with her at the library. When the library closed, she invited me back to her room. I was pissed at being dumped, feeling really low and depressed, and she totally made her move. I wasn't into her. I didn't want to be there, but I wound up having total revenge sex with her. Don't get me wrong. It was outstanding for the 2 hours, but there was no afterglow. I sat there and stared at the ceiling and thought, what did I just do? I stayed as long as I thought was decent, then dressed. She asked, "Where are you going?" And I had to basically say it was a gigantic mistake. She was enraged. As I learned from others, she had a huge crush on me for 2 years and made her move when she learned I broke up with my former girlfriend. I never forget standing in the parking lot and unlocking my car while she shouted obscenities at me at 2 in the morning. We had a lot of mutual friends. Half told me afterwards that she was crazy while the other half thought I was a gigantic asshole. And I kind of had to agree. My next 2 years was spent dealing with her shit. The midnight drunken dials. The catty remarks. The notes under my windshield wipers. And the confrontation in a restaurant a year later when I was dating someone really nice. Ruined the evening. After that, I never, ever had a FWB again. I didn't care how awesome she was. I wouldn't make the beast with 2 backs for at least 6 or 7 dates. All because of one nut job in college. Story 2. This guy that always flirted with me while we were in college. He was cute, but I was in a long-term relationship and cheating is an absolute no for me, so I always rebuffed him. Anyway, a couple years later I run into him and his friend at a bar, and we discover neither one of us are in a relationship. I remember thinking at the time how awesome it was this whole thing had come full circle so many years later, and it felt meant to be in a way. So stupid. So we hang at the bar for a while, drinking and dancing, making out, and eventually we decide to go back to his place. We were both pretty drunk, so the sex wasn't that great. But when I woke up the next morning sober and looked around, I realized that piece of shit was definitely in a relationship. It turns out he was and had been married for at least 6 months, and he took me back to the house he shared with his wife. I don't know where she was at the time, but I bolted out of there so fast and immediately blocked his number. I still feel disgusted when I think about it a decade later. Although the earring and lip gloss I hid in his house before I ran out of there made me feel a little better about myself, I still regret not finding a way to tell his wife directly. I was just so ashamed. Story 3. My ex. Took my virginity, then strung me along for a couple years while she cheated on me while I was off in engineering school. Destroyed me emotionally enough to drop out of the program I was in, top 5 computer science program in the USA at the time. I thought she was the one because she always acted like the good Christian girl, and we had sort of planned our life out together, down to how many kids we wanted to have and adopt. Took her back after she said that I really did love her. Found out it was cause the guy she was screwing told her that he was just with her to tell all his friends he f***ed her. Strung me along for another year or so before finally dumping me. Her friends didn't like me and actively tried to hook her up with other guys while we dated. Didn't realize how much losing your virginity to someone you love when the feeling isn't reciprocated can f*** up your mental health. Basically didn't get out of bed for about a year, then started working at my summer job from high school full-time. Reconnected with my now wife there and expecting a baby girl in a few months. But seriously, F you, Mary. I'm glad your fiancé cheated on you. Taste of your own medicine. Story 4. An Olympic athlete. She was by far the fittest woman I've ever met. And while I consider myself a decent amateur in the pillow arts, I did not have the conditioning to match it with an athlete in her physical peak, who had denied herself any physical pleasure, not just sex, but chocolate, comfort food, alcohol and such, for almost a year. Despite her obvious enjoyment, she still was not sated after the first, second, third, or fourth round. Every time I would muster the energy, and every time she took everything I had and wanted more. At first, I persevered out of lust, then out of pride. Once that failed, I felt it was my patriotic duty to represent my nation with this foreign visitor. But in the end, I tapped out. I had nothing more in me. So, she left me there in the hotel, drained, bruised, and utterly exhausted. I was defeated. I let myself, my city, and my country down. I regret not spending more time on my cardio. Story 5. Oh, maybe 1. Slept with an ex after randomly bumping into her on a night out. I'd left early to avoid anything happening but was so drunk I couldn't find my way out of the venue. Long story. There were dozens of doors and several floors/sets of stairs with no signs anywhere. It was like one of those. Where the f do I go? Video games. So went back down to find my friends and bumped into her again. Her friends had left, and I didn't want to leave her on her own, and she made it clear she didn't want to sleep alone, so we got a taxi to mine. While I was in the shower in the morning, she came in panicked saying my parents were at the door. They'd seen her, so my dad was asking about her while she was hiding in my room. My parents hardly ever came over. What were the odds it'd be that morning at that time? The problem was she got really upset at seeing them, as she still wanted to get back together, and I didn't. I walked her to the metro and put her on it while she was crying. I felt quite bad. Never saw her again. I don't regret our time together, but part of me regrets sleeping with her on that occasion. You know what they say, never go back to a lit firework. Story 6. A friend who I crushed on for years. She was the typical friend of a friend who started hanging out with us and was in the same school as me. Always fancied her. She used to tease me constantly. She was in a relationship with a guy 6 years her senior. We were 17 at the time. After a while, he got sent down and we drifted over the course of a winter. Then I got a message asking if I was free to help her move into her own place. Wasn't doing much anyway, so thought, f it. Helped her move in. She asked for a massage, moved my hands to her chest. I didn't stop. Then I left because I had work the next day. I later get a text saying, "You could have stayed." Fast forward a few months and I lost a pile of weight. Got a car and a job because I was focusing mainly on myself. I get a text again from an unknown number, new phone at the time. It was her asking if I wanted to go for a drink. I declined but offered to pick her up afterwards. She tells me to pick her up there, and then, while driving, she says, "I feel like I owe you," and decides to make her move. We pull up, climb in the back. I get in, and then I immediately regret doing so. This girl had strung me along for so long and was now no longer as attractive as my overly horny 16-year-old self thought she was 3 years prior. I pull out, tell her I don't feel comfortable, and take her home. I get ghosted other than a few comments about my dating habits following on from our encounter. Part of me thinks I should have went the whole way. Part of me thinks I should have just ignored the texts. All of me wishes I hadn't met her in the first place. Story 7. There is only one guy I've had real regrets over. We met on a dating app, texted for a week or so. He seemed really sweet. Invited me over to his place to watch movies. Yes, I realize now how dangerous that was. Also, I should have known his intent. I was young and naive. I had told him up front I wasn't going to have sex with him if I came over. He said no, of course not. I got there, and we watched a couple movies, and he offered me some drinks, then shots. I was going to drive, so I didn't want too many. Then he started kissing, and I went along but said no further. Well, he just kept kissing and touching. We ended up sleeping together. No condom. He finished inside. I wasn't on birth control. He didn't ask. He just did it. As soon as it was done, I made up some excuse I had to go. This was over a decade ago, and I still am mad at myself for letting it get that far. I felt so friggin' dirty and disappointed in myself the next day. I went to get Plan B. I eventually texted him the next afternoon, and he said, "Yeah, I'm not really interested in dating." I didn't feel a spark. And that was that. Looking back, it was plain as day to see. I wish I could give my younger self some confidence to say no is no. I should have stood up for myself. To this day, I just wish I had called him a pig at least, but I didn't want to waste any more of my breath on that loser.